The secret room they found after years, what was inside shocked everyone. Before we begin, don't forget, if you're into dark mysteries, real investigations, and stories that twist your mind until the very last second, make sure you hit subscribe. Trust me, you don't want to be the one who hears about the next case after it's already too late. The smell of sawdust still hung in the air when the screaming started. Detective Mara Ellison had been on the job for 16 years, but nothing about the 9:17 a.m. call from West Ridge Lane felt routine. Contractors renovating a 50-year-old suburban home had discovered something deeply disturbing, according to dispatch. The voice on the phone was shaking so violently that the operator had to repeat the address twice to confirm it. By the time Mara arrived, the crew was huddled on the front lawn, pale and silent, like men who had seen something they couldn't entirely process. One of them pointed toward the house without speaking. Inside, sunlight streamed through the broken section of drywall where workers had taken a sledgehammer to expand the living room. But behind the wall, instead of insulation, wires, or framing, there was a hidden door, sealed shut, edges painted over dozens of times. The crew had pried it open with crowbars. And that's where the nightmare began. The small room behind the door was untouched by time. No dust. No decay. No mold. Just a single wooden chair in the center, a stack of notebooks on the floor, and a rusted camera on a tripod aimed at a round hole drilled directly through the wall, pointing into what used to be the living room. Mara stepped inside slowly, the floorboards creaking under her boots. The air was cold, unnaturally cold, as if it had been sealed for a lifetime. She crouched by the notebooks and gently opened the top one. The handwriting was rigid, controlled, and disturbingly intimate. April 14th, 3:12 p.m. The father arrived home early today. He's hiding something from his wife. June 2nd, 11:48 p.m. The son cries himself to sleep again. He doesn't know anyone can hear him. August 29th, 7:03 a.m. They forgot to lock the back door. If I wanted to, I could step out right now. Page after page. Year after year. Detailed observations of a family who lived in the house more than 2 decades earlier. Arguments. Secrets. Weekly routines. Even conversations they had in whispers. Someone had been watching them. Not randomly. Not briefly. For years. Detective James Rowe, Mara's partner, stood rigid in the doorway, staring at the camera. This thing's ancient. Haven't seen one like it in years. He tapped a knuckle against the metal frame. But look at this. It's clean. No dust in the lens. No corrosion inside. Somebody maintained it. Mara felt the skin along her arms tighten. Somebody cared about this room. Cared enough to keep it functioning. James didn't respond. He wasn't looking at the camera anymore. He was staring at the wall behind it. There, carved faintly into the paint, were 3 words. I was never alone. Mara's stomach dropped. Get forensics in here now, she said sharply. As officers began taping off the scene, the homeowners, a retired couple who bought the house after the previous owner vanished decades earlier, arrived in a state of shock. They swore they had never seen the door, never suspected a thing. The wall had looked perfectly normal. But then the husband said something that made Mara freeze mid-step. When we moved in, the real estate agent told us the previous owner left suddenly. Packed a few things and disappeared. They never found him. James slowly exhaled. So where did he go? Mara didn't answer. She was looking at the chair again. At the notebooks. At the cold, perfectly preserved room. And then she noticed something she hadn't seen before. Deep beneath the chair, a fresh scuff mark. Not decades old. Recent. Someone had been in the room not long ago. And when Mara spotted the faint imprint of a boot sole in the dust just outside the doorway, one that didn't match any contractor's shoe, her pulse began to race. Because whoever had been living in that hidden room might still be inside the house. The house fell into a suffocating silence the moment Detective Mara Ellison announced a full sweep. Officers moved room to room with drawn flashlights, every shadow suddenly suspicious, every creak in the floorboards amplified into something threatening. The homeowners waited outside with blankets around their shoulders, trembling, not from the cold, but from the realization that someone might have been living only a few steps away from them without their knowledge. Mara crouched near the faint boot print outside the hidden door. It wasn't deep. Whoever made it had moved lightly, deliberately. She took a photo, then glanced at the staircase leading up to the bedrooms. The darkness above felt unnatural, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Clear downstairs, an officer called. Not enough, Mara muttered. We check everywhere. Detective James Rowe emerged from the kitchen holding a crinkled piece of plastic. Found this in the trash. It looks new. He handed it over, a protein bar wrapper, spotless, with a recent expiration date. Mara scanned it quickly. The homeowners said they don't buy this brand. So someone's been eating here, James said grimly. The thought tightened the air even further. It wasn't just that someone had lived behind the wall years ago. Someone had been here recently. Watching. Listening. Moving quietly enough to avoid being caught. And the sealed room, it clearly hadn't been as sealed as it looked. Upstairs, the first unsettling discovery came from the guest bedroom closet. An officer called out, "Detectives, you need to see this." Inside the closet, behind neatly hung coats and a box of Christmas ornaments, a section of the drywall had been loosened from the inside. Mara pressed on it gently. It shifted outward an inch, revealing a narrow gap large enough for someone to slip through. Behind it, dust on the floor had been disturbed, a smeared pattern of footprints that led toward the ventilation duct. Could someone have crawled through the vents? James asked. Mara shook her head slowly. Not all the way. But they could hide. Or travel between rooms. She imagined a figure quietly sliding into the duct space the moment the crew began knocking down walls. A figure who knew the house better than anyone else. While technicians began removing the vent covers, Mara checked the master bedroom next. The blinds were drawn, sunlight barely filtering through. But something caught her eye immediately, a single strand of hair on the nightstand. It was long and dark, not matching the homeowners. She placed it into an evidence bag, her pulse steady but alert. Then she opened the top drawer. Inside lay a small, old-fashioned flashlight, dust-free. And beneath it, a photograph. Her chest tightened when she saw it. The picture showed the original family who lived in the house nearly 25 years earlier, a husband, wife, and young boy posing in the living room. But in the blurred background, barely visible through the reflection in the glass frame on the wall, was something uncanny. A silhouette. Standing just inches behind the photographer. James, Mara called softly. He stepped beside her, eyes narrowing at the faint outline. That's not a smudge. No, Mara turned the photo over. On the back, written in the same tight handwriting from the notebooks, were 2 words. Still here. Before they could process the message, a shout came from downstairs. Officers were rushing toward the basement door, which was slightly ajar. Mara and James hurried down the hall, their footsteps echoing in unison. One officer pointed at the door, breathless. We checked it 10 minutes ago. It was locked. Mara stepped closer, hand hovering above her holster. Someone opened it. James swallowed hard. Or someone never left. Mara pushed the door open slowly. A cold draft rushed out, the kind that felt like it had been building for years. The basement was engulfed in darkness, the single bulb at the top of the stairs flickering faintly. She descended the first step. Then another. James followed close behind. Halfway down, Mara froze. There was something on the concrete floor. A small, rectangular object catching the dim light. A notebook. But not one of the dusty old ones from the secret room. This one was clean. Placed carefully in the center of the basement. Mara approached it, heart thudding. On the cover, written in the same rigid handwriting, was a chilling message. I knew you'd come. And beneath it in smaller lettering. Look behind you. Mara didn't turn around immediately. Years of experience had trained her to stay still when instinct screamed to move. James stood to her right, hand hovering near his holster, breath shallow. The basement walls seemed to press inward, the silence stretching dangerously thin. Finally, she exhaled and pivoted sharply, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. Nothing. Just shadows trembling against unfinished concrete. pipes overhead humming with the low rattle of the furnace. But something was off. A faint scrape, like a shoe sliding against stone, echoed from the far corner. Mara raised her voice, calm but firm. "This is Detective Ellison. Step out where we can see you." Silence replied, cold, calculated silence. She signaled James to circle left while she moved right, both of them angling toward the darker part of the basement where old furniture had been pushed into a cluttered maze. A broken crib, a rusted metal shelf, boxes stacked unevenly, casting jagged shadows that looked eerily human. Mara knelt near the notebook on the floor. The pages were crisp, untouched by dust. She flipped the cover open. The first page held a single line. "You watched the room. I watched you." Her mouth went dry. This wasn't just someone hiding. This was someone studying them with the same obsessive precision he used on the family decades ago. James whispered, "He's taunting us." But Mara wasn't convinced. This felt like something more, like someone laying out pieces to a puzzle only he understood. She flipped to the next page. "You're asking the wrong question. Not who built the room, but who used it after." Before she could read further, a loud metallic clang shattered the stillness. Both detectives spun toward the sound, coming from the old boiler at the back of the basement. James rushed over, pulling the panel open. Empty. But something lay on the floor beneath the boiler. A folded slip of paper. Mara picked it up carefully. Inside, written in small, precise handwriting, was an address. Her blood ran cold. It was the address of the boy from the old family photo, the child who'd lived in the home 25 years earlier. According to property records, he would be in his 30s now. James looked at her, realization dawning. "You think he built the room?" "No," Mara said quietly. "I think he was the one watched." Suddenly, the basement door at the top of the stairs slammed shut. Officers outside shouted in confusion. Someone had moved through the house fast, silently, slipping past people like smoke. James bolted up the stairs, wrenching the door open. Patrol units were already spreading through the yard, flashlights cutting frantic arcs through the trees. One officer shouted, "Movement in the backyard, north fence." Mara and James sprinted outside. But by the time they reached the fence line, whoever had been there was gone. Only a small cut in the wire remained, a clean slice, deliberate and practiced. No footprints. No trail. Just cold air and the lingering feeling that someone had been watching them even as they searched for him. Back inside, forensic teams finished processing the hidden room. After several hours, they delivered the final detail that reframed everything. The camera, a technician told them, was modified. It wasn't just recording the family. It was recording whoever entered the room. Mara stared at him. "You mean?" "It was a trap," he said. "Someone wanted to see who would find the room." The final piece clicked into place. The room was never abandoned. Not forgotten. Not sealed by accident. It was designed to be discovered. And the moment the contractors broke through the wall, the watcher knew it was time to return. 1 week later, detectives arrived at the address from the boiler note. But the man who answered the door wasn't the boy from the photo. It was his cousin. The original child had died 15 years earlier in an unrelated accident, meaning the note wasn't pointing them to a suspect. It was pointing them to a dead end. A message. The taunt. A way to show he was always 3 steps ahead. The case file remained open, but the officers quietly admitted the truth. Whoever had watched the family, whoever had lived in the walls, whoever had stood behind the photographer decades ago. He was still out there. Still watching. Still slipping through cracks and shadows no one else even noticed. And the last page of the new notebook, found only after Mara reopened it days later, held one final message penned in that same rigid hand. "You sealed the door behind you. But I still know every way in." If you thought this story was intense, you're not ready for what comes next. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next case.